honor to have you, and we appreciate the opportunity. In your recent Taschen book, Homes for a Time, Volume 3, you have selected cutting-edge residences from around the world. What criteria did you use to select the homes featured?
Well, we know it's a very large book, and the intention is to give an idea of things that are happening in different parts of the world. That's one element, different continents, different countries, and also in different styles. There's no attempt to have an idea of a unifying style. I don't even think such a thing exists, but these are varied houses which can be quite large or very small in some cases too. The idea is it's how people live today. People who live in a small house or in a very big house, they're both in this book. And I have a personal interest in contemporary architecture. So I have done my best to select these houses with the help of friends who are architects that Taschen has worked with in the past with me. And they give me their opinion, and I go from there. I contact each architect, and I make the list, and I collect the images and drawings that are used in the final book. So the whole thing is an equilibrium that is intended, perhaps, if it succeeds, giving an idea of the different ways that people can live today.
Which challenges and opportunities do you foresee for architecture in the coming years?
Well, obviously there are issues raised by houses that are a little bit different than public buildings, for example. They're smaller. They allow architects perhaps and clients a bit more freedom to do what they want. But everybody is aware that architecture, be it at the level of an individual family house or a big building, needs now to be attentive to the issues that are those of the world, the climate change, of sustainability, and almost all of these houses, I think all of them, take this into account in different ways, both with the materials that are chosen or the location, the siting, that kind of passive approach to energy use is also present in many of these houses. And as for challenges that they're faced, well, there's, materials have become difficult to obtain. Land is difficult to obtain depending on which part of the world you're in. It's different if you're in Tokyo or in the wilderness in Colorado. But there are issues of reduced material possibilities because of scarcity, climate change, and then also the evolution in architecture, which is one of technology, designing with computers, designing with very sophisticated methods, including artificial intelligence now beginning to be applied. How can you best design the house so that it's comfortable, so that it's sustainable? And those issues apply to houses as well as to larger buildings. Again, houses are a bit freer because they're smaller, and it's up to one client as opposed to a committee for a big company or whatever.
Architecture has traditionally been perceived as a collection of independent objects. How can architects and urban planners shift to a more holistic perspective and see architecture as something deeply connected to its social, cultural, and environmental context?
Well, I would take issue with the statement that architecture has always been seen as a collection of individual objects. I think, on the contrary, if you go back in time, you see old villages, you could imagine, or a city like Siena, built by different architects at different times, and yet the whole thing fits together. It becomes a whole, just because of the way people thought, and perhaps egos were not quite so much of an issue then as they are now. I think there was a movement away, obviously, from what can be called a holistic approach, or a community approach where buildings fit together and have some sense amongst each other. Then there were individual houses. There was, the whole thing of modernism and the Bauhaus and the tabula rasa, as I said, we're going to knock everything down and start over. But I think that idea of taking everything away from the past is now in the past. It has been forgotten in terms of contemporary architecture. And there is a desire to be responsible, to fit in, to respect what exists around you. I think almost every architect now attempts to respect, be it a natural setting, some of these houses are out in nature, so it's a natural setting to respect in the various ways that word can be defined. And, or if you're in a more urban or more community environment, to respect, there are zoning regulations that make you do it, but there are also subjective decisions that make things fit in. I think fitting in, being responsible, and being part of something larger are trends, tendencies, and even obligations in today's architecture.
The climate crisis has highlighted the need for radical rethinking in architecture. What strategies do you believe should guide architecture to become an active force in mitigating climate change?
Well, I said a few words about this before. I don't know if everything will be kept, but obviously this awareness that that there is a need to be careful about building. Building, in fact, in its various forms, is one of the major sources of greenhouse gas emissions in the world. Things like cement have been found to be much less virtuous than was thought at a certain time. So there's been a shift in materials. Wood is being used a lot more. It can't always be used, and it's not always approved for a certain use, in terms of regulations, fire restrictions in particular. But wood is one way to make buildings responsible, and other natural materials, stone, wood, also take into account now the distances over which materials have to be hauled, because that's another source, an indirect source of pollution and problems. So locally sourced materials, a certain modesty as well, I think, has become more fashionable than it was at a certain time. Even for those with considerable means, they are aware that they don't want to leave a gash in the landscape. They want to be part of the situation they're in, be it urban, community, or in the wilderness in particular. Sustainability and what used to be called green architecture have almost become part of what is normal and natural. They're not exceptional. For a while they were exceptional. Some architects would go off and do something green and strange looking. Now sustainability is part of architecture, and it's almost invisible in many cases because of the way it's approached as part of a whole.
Architecture also has the ability to reflect and amplify the cultural identity of a site. How can architecture find a balance between preserving local culture and the pressures of globalization and modernization?
Well, it's true that globalization in architecture in particular, and even more so when you come to small houses, which are usually done fairly fast compared to big buildings, the effect of globalization has been heightened by internet, which gives architects all over the world the opportunity to look at what's being done elsewhere. This was more difficult in the past when they relied on magazines if they had them, or books. This is now, internet is now, books like what we've done are an influence as well, because they're very international. So I'm going to have to ask you to maybe to repeat the question.
Yes, of course.
I got lost a little bit in there.
It's about finding the balance between the preservation of local culture and the pressures of
course. Well, local culture is, I think, despite globalization, local culture is something that architects all over are engaged with. They want their building to be of its place, whether they come from somewhere else originally or not. So there are elements such as the materials used, the ways in which houses are built and sited. If they have a central courtyard, for example, as they might in Latin America very frequently, and in some other countries, China, for example. There are elements of a local language that are still very much present and heightened, in fact, by architects. I don't think there's any, I think there's less desire to be global in the design of houses now than there was 20 years ago. There was modernism, which had a certain hold. Now there is no central style, there is no, nobody is pressuring architects to make buildings that look like A or B. They are freer, they look around them, they look at local influences, I think, much more than they used to, even if they come from another place when they build.
With global challenges constantly evolving, how do you think architectural education should transform to better prepare future architects?
It's no secret that it's not easy to become an architect, especially an independent one. There's a whole mechanism in education. You get your degree, then you often, or maybe even before, you go and work in an architectural office, and often the architects have you do rather menial tasks. I don't want to speak badly of the profession in any sense, but it's a difficult road to become an architect, especially an independent one. There you need a client, you need a budget, and this comes to you with age and experience. So how do you get to that point? It's a bit of a quandary. But I think the fact that more and more people look for inventive, small types of architecture, some of these houses are very much in that category. Things that don't cost too much are likely to be accessible to younger architects in terms of being asked to do them as well. When something is very large and very expensive, the client tends to want an architect who has a lot of experience. So I think there's that trend maybe to do things that can be done by younger architects exists very much. And of course, it depends on the client. Do they want somebody who has a world-known name, or do they want a young person who's going to do something new? I think there's a good amount of appetite for new forms.
Do you see any essential changes that might be necessary in curriculum or teaching methodologies to ensure that students are ready to face the complexities of the...
Well, I think that, it's a matter for each school and each country to decide. Obviously, there is a technological evolution which is considerable. And again, I briefly referred to artificial intelligence. Whether it will fundamentally change architecture or not remains to be seen. There are a lot of images made with AI that you believe them or you don't. I'm not sure they've changed architecture, but there are technological means that have to be mastered now by young people, and it's up to the schools as well to perceive that and to give them what is necessary in terms of the education. How do you deal with rapidly evolving technology?
We know that you are always involved in new projects for Taschen. Would you be able to share with us a preview of any new books in the pipeline?
Sure. I think the next book that actually will come out has to do with houses as well, with a focus that's even more clearly on sustainability. Very much excluding other types of architecture, but focusing on houses that are taking a responsible or innovative approach to reducing pollution or reducing energy use. Obviously, there are different types of sustainability that one has to be concerned about. Another book that is underway and should be out, I think, next year as well, is on the Japanese architect Fujimoto. And this will be another of these rather large books like the Calatrava in front of me here. He is a very unusual and innovative architect, relatively young by standards of world-famous architects. He's building in France quite a bit. He recently finished a building for the École Polytechnique in Saclay outside of Paris. And he has housing also in Montpellier and a number of buildings in Tokyo. This is a man who's from Hokkaido, northern Japan, which is not where most Japanese architects come from. And he has, I think, an innovative approach, and it will be a discovery for many people. So Fujimoto.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, for sharing some highlights from what's going to come, and we really, really appreciate you being here with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.